I want to get an update from you about Venezuela, which I actually think is kind of related to the issue of Gaza because of the fact that Gaza has really, as I always say, expanded the parameters of what is acceptable behavior around the world. Once you can commit a genocide live streamed, you can also bomb fishermen boats in the Caribbean and just murder people with zero evidence of wrongdoing, just because you want a war. And obviously, this has been a part of surrounding and escalating against Venezuela. Donald Trump has put Marco Rubio in charge of this expanding regime change operation in Venezuela. The CIA has been given the green light to do covert operations. We covered a lot of those things on a recent episode of my show Dispatches, where you were the guest. And we spent more than an hour breaking all that down because you are a Venezuela expert. You edited a very important book people should go check out called Why Venezuela? I believe it's published by 1804 Books. So Zoe, just a couple things I want to set up for you here and then kind of give you the floor to talk about. First off, we have a recent report. I'm not sure if you've seen it because I just saw it actually as we were recording. That's true. I check on the news while we're doing this live stream.
This is real news, people.
Breaking. Yeah. So the New York Times posted an article. It's called U.S. Ran a War Game on Ousting Maduro. Venezuela fell into chaos. And the premise of this article is that as President Trump pressed during his first term to oust President Nicolás Maduro, U.S. officials ran a war game to address or to assess what the Venezuelan strongman's fall might unleash. The results showed that chaos and violence were likely to erupt within Venezuela as military units, rival political factions, and even jungle-based guerrilla groups jockeyed for control of the oil-rich country. Those unclassified findings, supported by other expert analysis, underscore the risk associated with Mr. Trump's second-term push against Mr. Maduro. I love the word expert here, Zoe, because I'm like, you needed an expert to tell you that? Like, you needed some massive war game scenario played out by our mediocre loser officials in the Pentagon to tell you that what would happen in Venezuela is what has happened in every single country where the U.S. has collapsed the state, which is complete destabilization, violence, chaos, and jockeying for power by various warlords and mafias like Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. Like,
wait, what? That was a bunch of other.
Yeah, shocking. Sorry, guys. Breaking news. But I wanted to get your take on that, and Zoe, the fact that just this week we saw the State Department has designated Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization, claiming that this is a Venezuelan cartel headed by Nicolás Maduro. The weird thing is this cartel seems to be completely made up. There's Ryan Grimm, actually, Ryan Grimm of Dropsite News saying, Cartel Los Soles is the most obvious CIA made-up name for a cartel ever. No cartel names itself like that. This was a Langley creation, so finding the leaders shouldn't be hard. And before I hand the floor to you, Zoe, to talk a little bit about this and maybe give us some other updates related to Venezuela, I just wanted to say that there is a logic to labeling these cartels made up or real foreign terrorist organizations, because under the Obama administration, they set a precedent for making it okay for the White House, the executive branch, to basically strike at any terrorist organization in the world without having to get congressional approval. And that includes being able to extrajudicially kill people. So it is that precedent that the Donald Trump administration is moving forward with. And it was actually a very smart move to label drug cartels, again, made up or real, terrorist organizations, because then it gives the executive branch under the current president set by both parties the official legitimacy to like kill people without having to go to Congress first. But I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor to you if you could maybe address that cartel issue.
I'm gonna try to go one by one. There's a lot.
Let's go, baby.
There's a lot to go through.
Girl power hour.
We got this. I'm confident we can do it.
I believe in us.
I mean, I would just say it is all really related, because we just talked about how Ahmed al-Shara was just welcomed by Donald Trump, a literal, global terrorist, part of a foreign terrorist organization. It's like they took him off the list and they needed to like replenish. You just can't. I mean, it's like you have a literal terrorist that they're welcoming into the White House, and then you're calling a president. I'll just say, Ryan Grimm is not the only one to question and to really point out that Cartel de los Soles doesn't exist. CNN actually had a headline that says, "Is the U.S. targeting a Venezuelan cartel that may not technically exist?" So this is CNN. This is CNN saying this. Like, it, and, a lot of people are saying it doesn't exist. Okay, why doesn't it exist? So essentially, we're going to get into it. The root of the name Cartel de los Soles, which, like, I don't know, if you read DEA reports, Control F, Cartel de los Soles, it won't come up. Because it's not in these reports. It's not a cartel. I mean, we're in the post-truth reality, so maybe a cartel is just like you manifest it and it like appears. I mean, because it really feels like they're channeling that kind of woo-woo energy. Just like if you say it enough times, it'll happen. But Cartel de los Soles, the root of this concept is actually, it was used in 1993, I think, by a journalist to just talk about the fact that some senior military officers and anti-narcotic officials in Venezuela, by the way, 1993. When does Hugo Chavez come to power? 1999. So we're talking about pre-Chavez, pre-Maduro. At this point, they're like, trying to fight the good fight and organize the working class. So some of these military officials, a handful, a couple, they were involved in drug activities. This is not a Venezuela problem. I mean, across the world, across Latin America, there's top officials involved in organized crime, benefiting from drug trafficking, when the whole region is kind of dependent on drug flow to make their economies work. Remember, like the most of the world's cocaine comes from Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Of course, that's going to play into politics. The major drug trafficking routes of one of the world's most prized drugs is in South America, so it happens. So some of these senior military officers were involved in drug trafficking, and so, they said, oh, it's the Cartel of the Suns because their uniforms had a sun image on it. So they say Cartel of the Suns because they have a sun on their uniform, and it's a couple military officers. But again, a handful of military officers does not a cartel make. And then, that was poetic. I want people to really, I want to hammer home the point with lyricism. And then, after there was, this concept was again revived by some exiled Venezuelan journalist who started to kind of spin this narrative. And they say that, they're talking about the Suns, but then someone says in the Miami Herald in 2015 that the Cartel de los Soles is more of a phenomenon than an organized group. And so it's just kind of mentioned several times, but it's not, it's just kind of this idea of there being some people in the government, in the military, who are involved in drug trafficking. And so then what's interesting is that Maduro has been accused of being somehow a lead drug trafficker since 2020. If we remember, during the Guaido frenzied offensive where they just kept trying and trying and trying. At one point then they indicted, William Barr, the attorney general at that time, said, we're putting a bounty on Maduro's head. He's charged with drug trafficking. And interestingly enough, they actually don't talk about Cartel de los Soles at that point. Cartel de los Soles comes... Yeah, it's what? So it's a new cartel, but it's an old cartel. I mean, what is it? And so it comes back now in the last year after saying multiple times that Maduro was in charge of the famous Tren de Aragua. And then they say, no, it's Cartel de los Soles. And now all of a sudden, little Marco Rubio, I think we have to keep calling him that, says now it's a foreign terrorist organization. So, really, It's not, of course. It's not an organization. It's not anything. I mean, it's just like a concept that people threw around at one point. And I think at the end of the day, like these designations, as you say, have a clear political intent. And that intent is to justify illegal violence. And I think we have to be very concerned of the fact that this terrorist designation is being weaponized by not only Donald Trump, but of course other leaders in Latin America as well, using the idea of terrorism and drug trafficking to just carry out extrajudicial killings. I want to link this to the massacre that happened in Rio de Janeiro a couple weeks back, where over 100 people were killed by the state police. They went into a favela and just opened fire, chased people in a working class neighborhood, families going to work, all around, and they just murdered all of these people because they said, well, they're terrorists. So, all of these things are linked. They're trying to legitimize just using excess force against, in this case, in the case of the favela, like they're saying, oh, it's this big comando vermelho, we have to go after it. And so in all of these cases, you're seeing people using this idea, this specter of terrorism to just say, we're gonna completely do away with rule of law. And that's what's happening in this case. And I think the New York Times article, again, it's hilarious that they need experts to know that if you invade a country and kill the president, there's gonna be chaos. I mean, we can look at Haiti. The president was killed in 2022. And there has been a situation of protracted violence and instability in the country, gang rule. As Craig mentioned in his segment, the Kenyan police have deployed there to attempt to restore order, and it's failed. They're actually going to go back to Kenya because this was a failed mission. So this is concerning, and I think we need to ring the bell on all of these things. The fact that narco-terrorism is essentially an invention of the United States and its allies to kill people with no rhyme or reason, and that the U.S. really wants to go to war with Venezuela. And I do not think they're thinking it through.